They put me in the back room, the one with the stained carpet, and the thermostat that blinked but never worked. Said it was quiet. Said I'd be more comfortable. They didn't ask if I wanted to stay there. They just moved my chair, my pills, my blanket. No photo frames, no curtains, just a worn-out recliner and a tray table. My daughter-in-law smiled as she shut the door behind her. My son didn't even look up from his phone. "You'll be okay, Mom," he mumbled, already halfway down the hall. They thought I was done, thought I'd lost my use, lost my mind, lost my hearing. But I hadn't. I was still in there, tired, yes, but watching. And what I saw was cracks. Tiny ones, at first. The way she flinched when he touched her, the way he drank his dinner instead of eating it, how they spoke through closed teeth and forced laughs, how they never let the baby out of their sight, not because they were protective, but because the silence made them nervous. I watched the way she looked at the mail, how her eyes lingered too long on the bank statements, how he deleted messages the moment they popped up. I saw it all, and I wrote it down, in the dark, with a stub of eyeliner and an old grocery receipt. I made my notes. I knew the timing. I knew the tension. They said I was just waiting to debut. I wasn't. I was waiting for their divorce. And when the fighting finally spilled out like cheap wine on a white rug, when she screamed and he slammed doors and the neighbors started whispering, I was already 2 steps ahead. I wasn't dead. I was gathering words, mistakes, secrets. They thought I was fading, shrinking, losing, but I was preparing. And when they fell apart, I had the sharpest piece in hand. I didn't come from much. My childhood was threadbare, in places most people never see empty lunch pails. Shoes with cardboard slipped inside to patch the holes. My mother worked herself tired and my father didn't stay, so I learned early how to do without, how to stretch soup with water and how to mend socks with fingers that barely fit the needle. I didn't have dreams like other girls. I had chores and quiet wishes I kept tucked behind my teeth. So when love finally found me, I clung to it with both hands. Not the kind of love from fairy tales or films. No glitter, no grand gestures. Just a man with tired eyes who said I was worth building a life with. We married fast. Life didn't wait for romance. He brought me home to his parents' farm, his mother, already coughing blood, his father too bitter to help. I fed them before I ever fed myself. I folded sheets in silence and learned how to bathe someone who used to slap my hands for folding towels wrong. That's the kind of love I knew. Service, sacrifice, staying. When our daughter came, I swore she'd have more than I did. I stayed up late. I showed up early. I gave them the best years I had. My husband passed before she hit high school heart failure. Sudden and brutal, and just like that, I was alone. I cleaned houses and mended dresses, took in ironing and watched other people's kids so I could pay for shoes, lunches, school trips. I smiled through it all because she was my reason. I didn't complain. I didn't expect parades or praise. I just wanted her to feel safe, to grow up knowing what it meant to be chosen every single day. She grew fast, too fast. Suddenly, she was taller than me and talking about college and boys and how, "You wouldn't understand, Mom." I smiled. I did understand, more than she ever knew. When she met him, her husband, I didn't say anything. I had my thoughts, sure, but she was glowing, and he seemed steady enough. He had a steady job, a polite smile, called me ma'am, even when I asked him not to. I convinced myself that was enough. Years passed. They had their child. Then the layoff started. Then the move. Then the phone call. "Mom, it's just until we get back on our feet. Just a couple months." I didn't hesitate. "Of course," I said. I made the guest room up, moved my boxes, cleared closet space. It wasn't a question. That's what mothers do. We bend. We make space. We fold ourselves smaller so the ones we love can breathe easier. They moved in with 3 boxes of baby clothes, a worn-out couch, and heavy eyes. I cooked every night, rocked the baby while they rested, paid for diapers without keeping count. When the car broke down, I gave them my savings. I called it a gift so they wouldn't feel ashamed. When her husband started working late, I told her it was a good sign. When she cried in the bathroom with the water running, I pretended not to hear. I told myself, love can fix things. If I just keep giving, they'll feel it. They'll come around. But slowly, I noticed things slipping. Not things you can put your finger on, but things you feel. The way they looked at each other. The way they looked at me. Like I was furniture. Like I was in the way. But I still cooked. Still folded laundry. Still offered to babysit. Still hoped. Always hoped. Because that's who I am. I don't give up on people. Especially not my own. I stayed up late. I showed up early. I gave them the best years I had. And they took them with both hands. No thank you. No looking back. Just assumption. Just need. I became background support beams holding up a house I no longer recognized. But I stayed. Because maybe that's what love is, I thought. Maybe love is not being seen but showing up anyway. Now, looking back, I see it clearer than ever. It wasn't just that they needed me. It was that I wanted to believe love would come back around. That all I had poured into them would come home to me, someday, in a warm bowl of soup or a soft apology. But it never did. And yet, I didn't stop. Not until they gave me that back room. Not until they said it out loud that I was just waiting to die. That's when I knew. Love wasn't going to be enough. Not theirs, anyway. But mine had moved mountains. And now, it would move something else entirely. It didn't happen all at once. That's the trick with betrayal. It doesn't knock on the door, it seeps under it. Quiet, unassuming. Like a draft you don't notice until you're cold. I started hearing it in their voices first. My daughter's tone became clipped, efficient. She used to linger in the kitchen, asking about old recipes, laughing when I couldn't remember if I'd added the sugar. But those moments got shorter, sharper. "I've got it, Mom," she'd say, not looking up. "You can go sit down. Sit down," as if I hadn't spent my whole life on my feet for them. Her husband, well, he stopped pretending. I asked him once, gently, if he could lower the volume on the television so I could read in peace. He didn't even look at me, just said, "You're not paying for cable, are you?" I smiled like it didn't hurt. I always did. I thought maybe he was tired. Maybe work was harder now. Maybe I was a bit too sensitive. Then came the pills. One morning, she walked into my room with a little plastic organizer, the kind you get at pharmacies. "It's safer this way," she said, not asking, just doing. "You've been forgetting things." I hadn't. Not the important things. Not yet. But I let her take over. Because fighting with your own child feels like cutting into your own skin. I told myself she was just worried. That's what love does, doesn't it? Worries. Protects. I didn't want to believe it was control. The small things kept coming. They stopped telling me their plans. I'd hear the baby crying, the door slamming, the car starting and I'd realize they were gone. No note, no check-in, just gone. I began to eat alone, more often than not. They said they'd already eaten, or that they weren't hungry. I'd find empty containers in the trash. I'd find my favorite cookies, the ones I hid at the back of the pantry, opened and gone. "Oh, the baby loves those," she'd say laughing. Like I was being selfish for wanting something for myself. And then came the comments. Small, sharp, almost whispered. Once, when a friend called and I answered cheerfully, my daughter said later, "You sounded so perkier. You sure you're not just faking it for attention?" I laughed. She laughed too. But something sank in my chest and stayed there. Another time, she looked over my shoulder as I crocheted and said, "You used to be so fast at that. Used to be." Like everything about me was just a fading version of who I was supposed to be. She started saying I should rest more. "Go lie down, Mom. Take a nap." As if I was a child again. As if I didn't know my own limits. I tried to help around the household laundry, sweep the porch, but she would gently take the broom from my hands and say, "Don't worry about that. Just relax." But her smile never reached her eyes. And I knew. She didn't mean rest. She meant disappear. She said I should rest more. But what she meant was disappear more. One night I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. My name. The words burden and safety and home. I stood in the hallway, my hand pressed flat against the wall, like bracing for an earthquake. But there was no shaking. Just the slow, steady unraveling of everything I thought was secure. I went back to my room, closed the door softly, Saturday on the edge of the bed, and listened to the hum of the refrigerator down the hall like it was the only honest thing in that house. I didn't confront them. I wasn't ready. Some part of me still hoped, still wanted to believe that if I just loved a little harder, they'd remember who I was, what I'd done, that I'd held this family together with hands that were now too tired to tremble. I made excuses. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they don't mean it. Maybe it's just a phase. But deep down, I knew the tide was turning. And no matter how much I'd given, I was becoming something less in their eyes. Less capable, less needed, less seen. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just folded my hands in my lap and stared at the wall. The woman they thought I was weak, confused, tired. She didn't exist, but I let them believe it. Because sometimes silence is strategy, and I was still listening, still watching, still waiting. It started with a box. Just one. A small one, taped shut and labeled Winter Things. I found it outside my room, next to the coat closet I hadn't opened in weeks. Just decluttering, my daughter said when I asked. We want to make space for the baby's playpen. She smiled like it was all so harmless. Like folding up my life and tucking it away was some new version of love. I said nothing, just nodded. A few days later, more boxes appeared. My sewing machine, my photo albums, the rocking chair I used when she was a baby. Gone, piece by piece, without permission. It's just stuff, her husband said, not looking me in the eye. You won't even notice. They cleaned out the attic without asking, rearranged the kitchen, and moved my tea tins to a plastic tub in the garage. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't included. I was being erased softly, quietly, like dust wiped from a shelf. Every question I asked was met with a gentle lie or a cheerful brush off. We're simplifying, Mom. We're doing this for you. For me. Always for me. Then came the bank account. It was subtle. At first, missing statements, changed passwords. You don't need to worry about that anymore, she told me one afternoon as I held the phone in my hand, trying to check my balance. It's better if we manage it for you. I stared at her, blinking slow, unsure what part of that was supposed to comfort me. My money, my name. But I didn't push. Not yet. I didn't want to believe what I already knew, that it wasn't about helping me. It was about control. One evening, I overheard her husband laughing on the phone. Yeah, she's got no clue. Everything's in our name now. House, bank, all of it. I pressed my hand to my chest, not from shock, but from how quiet the pain was. Like a door gently shutting, not slamming. They had taken my name off the deed. My home, the place I paid for, the roof that saw my grief and my joy, legally no longer mine. I wasn't even notified. Just stripped, like an old coat they didn't want hanging in their hallway anymore. And the worst part? They didn't act like anything had changed. Still smiled at me. Still said, "Love you" over cold dinners and rushed mornings. Still handed me my pills like I was a child and told me to get some rest. I wasn't asked. I wasn't consulted. I was managed, handled, moved around like a piece of old furniture that needed to stay useful or stay out of the way. They stopped answering questions. Stopped asking them, too. My thoughts were no longer needed. My voice, once the anchor of the house, had become background noise. I could sit at the table for hours without a single word directed my way. If I spoke, they'd nod and move on. If I was silent, they didn't notice. One afternoon, I reached for the front door just to feel the sun, just to smell the lilac sand found a new lock installed. We just wanted to be safe, she said when I asked. Safe from what? From me. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just stepped back inside and sat quietly. I realized then they didn't lock the door to keep me in. They made me feel like I didn't deserve to open it. They moved the baby's crib into my room, said he slept better in there. I slept on the sofa. My room was no longer my own. My things were boxed. My name was gone. And still, I cooked their meals and rocked their child and smiled at the neighbors when they visited. I was expected to be grateful. Grateful for being allowed to stay in a house that once held every memory I owned. Grateful for being included in their family, even if I no longer had a place in it. But something in me cooled. Not like water, but like stone. Solid, still, quiet. I stopped asking questions, stopped hoping. And somewhere in that silence, I began remembering. Remembering names, remembering dates, remembering where I'd kept the old documents and the lawyer's card and the journal I used to hide behind the dresser drawer. They thought they'd buried me in kindness. They thought I was just waiting to die. But I wasn't. I was waiting for them to stop pretending, waiting for the mask to fall so I could see their faces clearly. Now I had. And they weren't smiling anymore. Not really. They took everything while smiling. My name, my home, my freedom. But they forgot something. I was still watching, and I was still here. I didn't scream. Not once. I didn't cry in front of them or slam a door or break a dish just to be noticed. That's not how I was raised. That's not how I move through pain. Instead, I found my old journal, the one I used to keep recipes in, back when life still had flavor. I tore out the soup stains and grocery lists and began again, page 1. But this time, it wasn't soup. It was facts. Times. Names. Words I heard when they thought I wasn't listening. The sound of her voice when she whispered on the phone. The numbers I glimpsed when he left the bank app open. I wrote it all down, line by line. Every dismissal. Every smile that didn't reach their eyes. They thought I was fading. I was filing away every sin in silence. They started fighting more. They tried to hide it, but walls are thin. And children are louder than they think when they argue behind closed doors. He came home late too often, and she slammed cabinet doors like punctuation marks. I heard things. You promised she wouldn't be a problem. We're not doing this in front of the baby. It's your fault we're even living here. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling fan, counting each slow turn while their voices sharpened down the hall. They never mentioned my name directly, but I knew. I was the weight. I was the background hum of guilt. Neither of them knew what to do with. And still, I wrote. I remembered things. Where I stored the original deed to the house. Where I'd hidden the lockbox key, the one they never found when they organized the garage. I remembered passwords, account numbers, names of people I hadn't called in years, but who once told me, if you ever need help, just say so. I hadn't needed them then. I do now. So I made a list. I didn't move fast. I didn't panic. I moved the way storms dazzle and silent until the wind shifts. Some mornings, I pretended to forget things. Let them believe I was slipping. They'd exchange glances like doctors in a waiting room. She's declining, he said once. We need to be ready. I smiled in the mirror that night and whispered, you have no idea what I remember. I watched their patterns. What days they left the baby with me. What nights they stayed out late, came back tense, didn't speak. I checked the mail before they did when I could. I learned which drawer they hid the important papers in. The new will, written without my knowledge. The bank forms. The power of attorney papers sun-signed, but ready. I photographed everything when no one was home. I saved them to a flash drive I wore around my neck, tucked behind an old locket. He started drinking more. Not wildly, just enough to loosen his tongue. I asked gentle questions. Everything all right, dear? He shrugged. She's impossible lately. I nodded. He didn't notice my hand tightening around the teacup. I served him cookies anyway. My daughter. She stopped hugging me. It was a small thing, but I noticed. She'd hand me my pills like I was a stranger. Avoid eye contact. Only touch me when adjusting a blanket or reaching past me. One evening, I asked if she wanted help with dinner. She said, it's just easier if you stay out of the way. I smiled. I went back to my room and wrote that down too. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even bruised anymore. I was steady. Years of surviving had made me a slow-breathing machine. I'd been through worse. I'd buried a husband, held my mother's hand through cancer, raised a child on less than a cashier's wage. I'd gone without so many times that hunger no longer scared me. I knew how to ration. I knew how to endure. And most of all, I knew how to watch. Every day, I sharpened my mind like a knife on old stone. Read law articles, watched videos late at night with subtitles on, took notes like I was back in school. I practiced signing my name slowly, clearly, firmly. I kept records in 3 places. I labeled everything in code in case they found it. But they didn't. They never looked that closely. That was their mistake. They stopped seeing me as a person. Just a presence. A relic. They thought I was fading. I was filing away every sin in silence. They had no idea that the woman they boxed into a back room still remembered how to protect herself. Still knew how to prepare. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need a crowd. I just needed time. And time, quietly, was exactly what they gave me. It began with a letter, just one, folded into thirds, sealed in a plain envelope, and sent to an address I hadn't used in years. An old friend's niece, now a lawyer, practicing estate law 2 towns over. I hadn't spoken to her since she was a teenager, giggling over ice cream in my kitchen. But I remembered her name. I remembered how she always listened when adults talked, how her eyes followed every word, like she was collecting something important. I wrote carefully, clearly, no emotion, just facts. A list of what was taken, what I still remembered, what they didn't know I'd seen. She called me the next week. "Mrs. Alden?" Her voice was warm, respectful. "I read your letter. Would you like to come in for a consultation?" My hands shook as I held the phone, but my voice didn't. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I would." I dressed with purpose the day of the meeting-pressed blouse, clean slacks, the necklace my husband gave me when our daughter was born. I took the folder I'd hidden behind the drawer lining my journal, photographs of documents, names, dates, the flash drive with scans. I walked into that office not like a victim, but like a woman reclaiming something. My name, my place, my truth. We went over everything, piece by piece. She didn't interrupt, didn't question my memory. She simply nodded and said, "You've got more than enough." I told her about the house, the bank account, the missing power of attorney form I never signed. She raised an eyebrow. That alone could be forgery. I felt my spine straighten in the chair. Investigators got involved. Quiet ones, discreet. They traced signatures, cross-checked dates, found discrepancies, found inconsistencies in the stories my daughter and her husband gave when asked about my accounts, found phone records that didn't match, found documents I'd never seen with my name, scribbled in someone else's hand. They filed a case. Elder fraud, misappropriation of assets, forgery. A judge reviewed the petition for guardianship they drafted behind my back and raised serious concerns. And then, the court ordered an independent evaluation. "Just to be sure," they said. As if I hadn't been sure all along. I sat in a quiet room across from a psychologist, answered questions calmly, recalled dates, faces, details from years ago. When she handed me a blank sheet and asked me to draw a clock, I drew it slowly, perfectly, ticked every number into place. When she asked me who was president, I told her. When she asked what I would do if I smelled smoke in a building, I said, I'd pull the alarm and walk out. I've done it before. She laughed. I didn't. The report came back, fully competent. No signs of cognitive impairment, capable of managing her own affairs. That was all the court needed. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the documents. The day of the hearing, they showed up my daughter and her husband, looking tired, tense, dressed in clothes too nice for people who'd called me a burden. I wore the same thing I wore to church simple, soft blue, no jewelry. I didn't need to shine. I just needed to be believed. The judge was fair, firm. He read everything, asked questions, gave me space to speak. I told the truth, slowly, clearly, like I was teaching someone how to sew. I told him about the day I discovered my name missing from the deed, about the money I never approved them to use, about the signature that wasn't mine on the power of attorney document. And then I told him something I hadn't written in any letter. I loved them, I said. I still do. But love should never mean disappearing. The judge ruled in my favor. The deed reverted back to my name. The bank accounts were frozen, investigated. The guardianship request was dismissed, permanently. They were reprimanded for overstepping, for deception. No handcuffs, no headlines. Just quiet justice. Just a gavel tapping softly on the truth. I walked out of that courtroom, steady, not triumphant like in movies, but solid. Like my bones had found themselves again. I didn't look back when they called my name. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just walked to the car, opened the door, and breathed. That night, I sat at my own table, in my own kitchen, with the lights dim and the windows open. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. I made tea, real tea, not the kind they brewed in a rush. I sat down with my journal and added one last line to that chapter. I took it all back, quietly. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I had the papers, the title, the proof, the legal right to every inch of that house they thought they owned. The house where they measured me for the shadows and rearranged my life without asking. The house where I once made cinnamon rolls for birthdays and bandaged scraped knees. The house where they whispered in the hallway and laughed in the kitchen while packing away my things like I was already gone. They thought it was theirs. They played house in my home. I pulled out the foundation. The listing went live on a Wednesday morning. My lawyer handled the details. I didn't even need to meet the realtor. Just sign the forms, all neat and clean. It sold in 6 days above asking. Good bones, they said. Warm history. If only the walls could talk. I smiled when I read that. They did talk. Just not to them. I didn't tell my daughter until the papers were final. She came home to a notice on the fridge. 30 days. That's all it said. No name, no explanation. Just time. She stormed into my room, eyes wild, mouth already ready to spit. But I was gone. I had moved out that morning. While she slept. While he showered. I left behind nothing but the silence they'd once given me. That and the buyer's agent's card taped to the bathroom mirror. I bought myself a little house. 2 rooms. A porch with peeling paint. A garden so dry it begged for water. It was perfect. Mine. I paid in full. No mortgage, no roommates. Just me. A kettle and a key that only I held. I slept better than I had in years that first night, no baby crying. No heavy footsteps. No muttered judgments outside my door. Just crickets and the ticking of a wall clock that ran 5 minutes fast but felt exactly right. But revengerial revengeise never loud. It's precise. I'd kept every receipt, every photo, every note. I had backups of emails, voice memos of whispered calls, screenshots of messages they thought were deleted. I didn't shout them into the void. I sent them quietly, strategically to the right people. The pastor, her boss, the board she volunteered for. I never added commentary. Just the facts. Just the truth they worked so hard to hide. Her husband's job had a morality clause. Turns out, companies don't like scandal, especially when it comes with proof. He was let go 2 weeks later. She tried to call me after that. 14 missed calls in one day. I didn't answer. The porch lights stayed off. Even when they cried. She posted a message online, some vague apology, wrapped in self-pity. People weren't kind. Turns out, truth travels fast when you've treated people like furniture. Her image crumbled. The invitation stopped. The mom group removed her without a word. And me? I sat on my porch with my tea and watched my flowers bloom again for the first time in years. They tried to fight the sale, claimed I'd tricked them, that I wasn't in my right mind. The judge disagreed. The bank agreed with the judge, and the deed agreed with me. Their words fell like soft, feather-seuseless, weightless. They had no legal ground to stand on, just stories and regret. And even those sounded tired. Sometimes I walk past that old house, someone else lives there now. They painted the shutters green. Hung wind chimes by the door. I don't stop. I just glance, then keep walking. It doesn't belong to me anymore. But it doesn't belong to them either. That's justice enough. I never yelled. I didn't need to. I wrote the ending they never saw coming. And this time, every signature was mine. The phone rang for weeks. First once a day, then 3 times. Then all hours. Like their guilt kept them up at night. I turned the ringer off, left the phone in a drawer, under a dish towel. I didn't need the sound of regret disturbing my peace. They left voicemails long, shaky ones full of words I'd waited years to hear. I'm sorry. It wasn't what we meant. Can we just talk? But I didn't press play. I didn't need to hear how they dressed their remorse in explanations. They wanted closure. I wanted silence. Then came the letters. Pages of looping handwriting I recognized from birthday cards and grocery lists. My daughter filled them with memory-soft ones. Sweet ones like sugar sprinkled over something rotten. She reminded me of the Christmas I made matching pajamas. The summer I held her in the hospital after her first miscarriage. She wrote about the nights I stayed up rocking her baby so she could sleep. She said she was sorry for forgetting, for not protecting me, for letting things go too far. But not once did she say she gave my home away, or that she stood by while her husband stripped me of my name. I read the first letter once, folded it, put it in the drawer with the phone. The others I didn't open. Mutual friends called, people from church, neighbors, old coworkers I hadn't heard from in years. All of them kind, well-meaning, too full of hope. She's really sorry. You only get one daughter. Forgiveness heals, you know. I smiled and stirred my tea. Said I'd think about it. I didn't. Because forgiveness isn't owed like a debt. It's a gift, and not one I was ready to give. They hadn't just broken trust, they'd buried it, and I had no interest in digging it back up. Instead, I gardened. My new house had a small patch of earth behind the porch, neglected, dry, stubborn. I liked it immediately. It didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. I bought gloves, soil, seeds, planted marigolds, tomatoes, lavender. I rose with the sun, pulled weeds, hummed quietly to myself as the world grew around me. Dirt under my fingernails felt more honest than any handshake I'd shared in the last decade. I found an old radio at a second-hand shop and tuned it to the jazz station. Miles Davis, Nina Simone, Coltrane. Their voices filled the house in the afternoons. Steady, smooth, unbothered. I'd close my eyes, sway a little in the kitchen, and feel something return. Not youth, not exactly joy, just presence. I was here, whole, untouched by what they wanted, what they begged for. Sometimes I'd see their names pop up on my screen missed calls, a message sent at midnight. Please, just talk to me. I miss you. I need you. I deleted them all. I didn't block them. I wanted them to wonder if I ever saw the words they spilled. I wanted them to sit with the quiet, the same way they made me sit with their coldness. Peace doesn't always come wrapped in soft music and open arms. Sometimes it comes when you stop responding, when you stop hoping people will change, when you finally accept that survival isn't selfish, it's sacred. I survived their dismissal, their condescension, their theft. I survived the betrayal of a daughter I once rocked to sleep and the man she married who never once called me Mom without gritting his teeth. I bought a new chair for my porch. Soft cushions, wide armrests. I sit there in the evening, watching the sun slide behind the trees. The wind carries the scent of rosemary and dirt. I drink tea that doesn't get cold because no one's calling me away from the table. I eat what I want, when I want. I never have to ask if it's all right to turn down the television. Once, I saw a car slow outside my gate. Her car. I knew the shape of it. The way it idled too rough, the dent near the back tire. She didn't come in, just sat there, then drove away. I didn't move, just sat in my chair, cup in hand, letting the moment pass like a cloud overhead. I know people talk, that some say I should forgive, that I should move on. But I did move on, just not in the direction they hoped. I moved toward quiet, toward ownership, toward dignity. I reclaimed my space, my choices, my voice. They wanted closure. I wanted silence. And that's exactly what I gave them. The first thing I hung on the wall was a clock. Not a fancy one, just an old brass piece I found at the thrift store. Its hands slightly tarnished. Its tick quiet but sure. I placed it above the kitchen doorway so I'd hear time passing softly, like a friend walking through the house. Not a threat looming over me. In the old house, I'd stopped hanging anything. Stopped decorating, choosing, claiming space. Everything was temporary, borrowed, tolerated. Here, every nail I hammered in was a decision. Every picture frame was a declaration. I'm still here. I bought curtains with little embroidered flowers. Not expensive ones, just cheerful. I lined the cupboards with fresh paper. Painted the front porch in a dusty lavender. I didn't ask anyone if it matched. I didn't ask anyone at all. That was the joy of it. I wasn't waiting for approval. I wasn't trying to impress. I was simply making something mine. Some mornings, I still catch myself listening for footsteps in the hallway. A baby's cry. The clatter of someone else's keys on the table. But it's just me now. The quiet isn't empty, it's mine. I light a candle when I make breakfast. I hum while I sweep. I leave dishes in the sink if I feel like it. I set the table for one and sit without hurry. No phones buzzing. No questions asked. No one sighing when I speak too slowly or ask to turn the volume down. The photo albums came out eventually. At first, I thought they might break messages full of birthdays, beach trips, school plays. But they didn't. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of tea and flipped through every one. There were pictures of her, with frosting on her nose, of my husband holding her in the hospital, of me, younger, tired, proud. I looked at them all. Some I smiled at, some I didn't, but no tears came. The grief had passed through me and gone quiet. What remained was understanding. I was never the burden. I was the foundation. I was the quiet engine that kept it all running, meals on the stove, clean socks in drawers, rides to school, birthday cakes, bedtime stories. I gave my strength when I barely had any left. I gave without keeping score. And when they forgot that, it didn't erase what I'd done. It didn't undo the decades of care. It just showed me they were never really looking. Now, I wake up each day and choose how to spend it. I take walks in the morning, sometimes just to the corner, sometimes all the way to the lake. I watch children play and don't ache for anything. I talk to neighbors who wave and ask how my tomatoes are doing. I don't wait for anyone to check in. I no longer tie my value to their attention. I read books, slow ones. I relearned how to crochet and started making blankets for the women's shelter in town. No one tells me what to do with my time. No one tells me I need to rest or stay quiet or move out of the way. I fill my days the way I fill my tea cup, intentionally, to the brim. Sometimes, in the quiet of the afternoon, I sit on my porch and look at the garden I planted with my own hands. The lavender's coming in beautifully. The marigolds are stubborn but strong. Like me, I think of all the times I sat in that back room at their house, wondering if I was in the way, if I was too much, too old, too slow. But here, I know the truth. I wasn't waiting to die. I was just waiting to be free. And now I am. It started with a post. Just a quiet one. No names, no locations, no details sharp enough to trace. I sat at my little desk in the evening, tea growing cold beside me, and typed it all out. Not the rage. Not the legal case. Just the shape of it. The silence. The betrayal. The way I took everything back without raising my voice. I ended it with a single line. They said I was waiting to die. I was waiting to be free. I didn't think much of it after I clicked post. I closed the laptop, rinsed my cup, and went to bed. By morning, it had thousands of views, hundreds of comments, dozens of messages from strangers, most of them women, many my age, some older. They said things like, "I thought I was the only one. This happened to me too. Thank you for saying it out loud." I sat with those words for a long time, held them like letters from a world I hadn't known existed, women who had been quiet for decades, women who had been made to feel like they were lucky just to be tolerated, women who knew the sound of a door shutting behind them and the quiet dread of being erased. I replied slowly, carefully, not to all of them, but enough to begin something. I didn't call it a movement. Movements are loud. We were not loud. We were steady. I shared tips, advice, sent templates for wills and power of attorney forms, links to elder law resources. I told them how I tracked everything in a notebook, how I kept documents in places no one thought to look. I told them to trust their memory, their instinct, their worth. One woman, Miriam, messaged me 3 days after reading the post. She lived in Ohio. Her son had convinced her to sign temporary control over her finances while she recovered from surgery. That was 2 years ago. She hadn't touched her own account since. I sent her 3 emails, 2 phone calls, a template letter, and the number of a legal aid clinic in her area. A week later, she messaged me back. He cried when the papers were served. I didn't. After that, it spread. One woman helped another, then another. We started at chainmails, handwritten notes, quiet letters slipped under doors in assisted living centers. Some printed out my post and left it in libraries. Some read it aloud at church luncheons. Some rewrote it in their own words. The message stayed the same. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And you're not done. We shared stories in code. The garden's blooming meant a case had been won. The porch light is off meant someone had blocked a toxic call. We made bookmarks with hotline numbers, birthday cards with lawyer referrals inside. It wasn't organized, but it was real, and it was everywhere. I met 3 of them in person. We had lunch at a cafe near the train station. All of us silver-haired, soft-spoken, and steel underneath. We talked like old friends, though we'd only just met, shared photos of grandchildren, and talked about pensions, medication, revenge. We laughed harder than I had in years. One of them, Janice, had spent 4 years being told she was too forgetful to manage her own affairs. She kept a logbook in her nightstand. When her son tried to sell her car, she took the notebook to a lawyer and stopped the sale. He didn't even know I knew how to type, she said, chuckling. Joke's on him. I was a secretary for 30 years. The sisterhood grew, not with hashtags, not with billboards, but with grit, with whispers, with care. We were women who'd been pushed aside, told to rest, to hush, to fade. But we didn't. We sharpened. We remembered. We helped each other reclaim things they never should have taken. Sometimes I walk to the mailbox and find letters now, real ones. In careful handwriting with return, addresses written faintly, like a secret. They tell me about court dates, reconciliations, victories. Some just say thank you. Others say, what now? I always write back, whatever you want. We weren't trying to be loud. We weren't trying to shame anyone. We just wanted to be heard, to be free, to stop apologizing for surviving. They made us feel small, but together, we made something big. And we're still growing. Absolutely, Z. I'm ready to draft the final section, the legacy. They'll learn my name in the will, following the same tone, word count, and narrative style as the rest of the script. Here's the full, approximately 950-word scene, completing the story. Underscore 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 I rewrote my will in the quiet hours. Just before dawn, with the windows open and the smell of rain lingering in the curtains. It wasn't out of anger. I didn't feel anger anymore. What I felt was something cooler, sharper. Just, I wanted my last act to mean something. Not for them, the ones who silenced me, dismissed me, used Maybut for the women who still sit in their quiet rooms, wondering if they matter. I wrote each line with care, not vengeance. But I didn't spare the truth. The first section funds a legal support network for women over 60 who are navigating divorce, abandonment, or coercive financial control. It will pay for lawyers, filing fees, rides to court, things no one thinks older women need until they do. I named the fund after my mother, who stayed in a loveless marriage because she had no place to go and no name on the deed. I added a line that reads, "This fund is for women who were never asked what they wanted." The next section is for my granddaughter, the only one who ever looked me in the eye and asked, "How are you, Grandma?" without needing something in return. I remember the way she brought me tea when the adults didn't notice I was cold, the way she waited for me to finish my sentence Even when others talked over me. I left her a scholarship, enough to cover a full degree and a small apartment. Not because she was perfect, but because she saw me. Really saw me. That's all it ever took. To my daughter and her husband, I left nothing material, but I left words. A letter sealed and placed in the same envelope that once held their power of attorney forms the ones they never got to use. The letter is not cruel, but it is clear. You wanted control. You had it. And look what you did with it. I gave you my trust, and you turned it into paperwork. I gave you my presence, and you called it a burden. You will not carry my name like a trophy. You forfeited that privilege the day you erased me from my own home. I left a final line just for her, handwritten at the bottom in ink she'll recognize from my recipe cards. Being your mother was the greatest honor of my life, but surviving you was the greatest test of it. They'll be angry maybe, confused. Maybe they'll pretend they don't care, but they'll read it in silence, in private. The way I read their betrayal every day, I sat in that back room. I made sure my name will appear on walls and doors and grants long after I'm gone. Women walking into shelters will see it on plaques. Legal forms will carry it in small print at the bottom. Courtrooms will echo with the support my life made possible. I will not haunt them, but I will not vanish either. My legacy is not them. My legacy is every woman who whispers, "Me too," in the dark, and finally gets to stand in the light. I've made arrangements for my funeral to be small. No public show, no expensive flowers, just a garden service, music from my old jazz records, and a bench under the oak tree where the birds still gather. I asked for my favorite dress, the green one I wore when I bought my house. I want to be buried as myself, not as anyone's mother, or burden, or afterthought, just as me. And if they attend, I hope they sit quietly. I hope they think. I hope they see the faces of women they never noticed. I hope they feel, for one moment, what it's like to be left out of something final and irreversible. They said I was too old to matter. But they'll find my name in every room they walk into now, even if it isn't theirs. Underscore, 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 underscore. Let me know when you're ready to start the next one, Z. We've closed this one with power and grace.